The phone rang at midnight. Lena instinctively reached for it, her hand automatically searching for her glasses on the nightstand. "Emergency service. I'm listening." Her voice sounded composed and professional despite being abruptly awakened. 3 years ago, she would have passed a late-night call to another on-duty doctor. Back then, her schedule had been perfectly organized: day shifts at the private clinic, cozy evenings with her husband, plans for the future. Andrew, her husband, always said that night shifts weren't for her. "You're too valuable a specialist to waste your strength on emergency calls." He used to smile, kissing the top of her head. Their apartment in the city center was the embodiment of everything they had worked for. A bright living room with panoramic windows where they drank coffee in the mornings, discussing plans for the day. Andrew was a successful financial analyst, and she was a cardiologist. Their colleagues often said they were the perfect couple, both dedicated to their work, yet always finding time for each other. "Do you remember how we met?" Andrew often asked, though he knew the story perfectly. She had just started working at the clinic when he came for a routine checkup. "You listened to my heart so attentively that I decided it must belong to you now," he joked. That morning, the morning everything changed. Nothing hinted at trouble. It was an ordinary Tuesday at the beginning of April. Andrew was preparing for an important meeting with investors. "I'll be late. Don't wait for me with dinner," he said, tying his favorite grey tie. Lena remembered adjusting the collar of his shirt, a familiar gesture she repeated almost every morning. "Call me when you're done," she asked, kissing him goodbye. He nodded, smiled with that special smile of his, the right corner of his lips slightly raised, and stepped outside. It was the last time she saw him. He didn't answer in the evening, nor during the night. By morning, she had called all his colleagues, friends, hospitals, even the morgues. No one had seen Andrew after that meeting with investors, which, as it turned out, never took place. His car was found in the business center's parking lot. His briefcase was on the back seat, and his phone was turned off. The police began their investigation, interrogations, reports, endless questions. "Did your husband have enemies? Problems at work? Any strange behavior lately?" Lena answered, "No, no, and no." Andrew had been successful, well-liked, flawless at work. The only odd thing she remembered later was a conversation a week before he vanished. He had asked how she would feel about moving to another country, but back then it seemed like a casual talk about the future, something all couples discuss. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The investigation reached a dead end. Friends and family said, "You need to move on." Lena tried. She switched to night shifts on the ambulance service. It was easier there. The constant rush and endless calls left no room for thoughts. But every time she returned to their apartment, her gaze fell on his photograph on the wall. Andrew was smiling, that same raised right corner of his lips, as if he knew a secret she couldn't yet decipher. 3 years passed. Lena learned to live alone, or rather, to exist. Her days became a strict routine. Ambulance shifts, short sleep, then work again. In their, now her, apartment, nothing had changed. The same photos on the walls, his second favorite tie in the closet, his favorite mug in the kitchen. Her colleagues tried to support her. Especially caring was Dr. Marina Sergeyevna, the head of the department. "Sweetheart, you need rest," she would say, noticing the dark circles under Lena's eyes. "Maybe take a vacation, travel somewhere." But Lena only shook her head. Work was her salvation. Every saved patient, every grateful smile gave a faint sense of purpose. And at night, when the city fell asleep, she sat by the window in their living room and sifted through memories like old photographs. Andrew's parents called often during the first year. Then less and less. They last saw each other on the anniversary of his disappearance. Lena, dear, he would want you to be happy, his mother had said, squeezing her hand. Lena nodded, but something inside resisted. How can you be happy when a part of you simply vanished? Some man tried to court her. The new cardiologist at the clinic, Dmitri, often stayed late after shifts, offering her a ride home. Lena, let's just have dinner together, he would say, but she always found a reason to refuse. The very thought of new relationships felt like betrayal. That evening, the shift was especially exhausting. 3 calls in a row, the last to an elderly woman with a heart attack. By dawn, as Lena was filling out the paperwork in the ambulance, another call came in. Male, loss of consciousness, address 40 to 70 Avenue, the dispatcher reported. Something twinged inside her. She knew that neighborhood well. She and Andrew had often walked there on weekends, planning to buy an apartment in one of the new buildings. When the ambulance arrived at the address, it was already getting light. A security guard met them at the entrance of a business center. 3rd floor, office for 103. The man felt unwell while working at night. Lena climbed the stairs, running through possible diagnoses in her mind. Exhaustion, hypertensive crisis, heart attack. 3 years of ambulance work had shown her everything. The office door was ajar. The dim light of a desk lamp lit the spacious room with several work desks. By the far wall, someone was half reclining in a chair. Hello, I'm the emergency doctor, Lena said. Walking deeper inside, the person in the chair slowly raised his head, and the world stopped. The same eyes, the same little crease by the lips, a bit more grey at the temples, but it was him. Andrew. Lena felt the medical case slip from her weakening fingers, somewhere at the edge of her consciousness. A thought flashed, say something, do something. But she could only stand and stare, and then she heard behind her, "Don't move, doctor." The cold voice behind her made her freeze. The sound of the door closing clicked like a trap. From the corner of her she saw movement. A tall man in a dark suit stepped between her and the exit. "Masha, call security," Lena whispered to her partner out of habit. But she heard only static. "No use. There's no signal here," the same cold voice said. "Please sit down. We need to talk." Andrew, if it really was him, slowly rose from the chair. His movements were unsure, as if he was recovering from a long illness. "Lena," he said hoarsely, and at the sound of his voice, her knees gave out. 3 years. She barely managed to whisper. 3 years, Andrew. Where were you? What happened? He took a step toward her, but stopped when the man in the dark suit raised a warning hand. "This is a complicated matter, Dr. Elena Sergeyevna," said a third voice. Another man stepped out of the shadows, a fit, grey-haired man in his 60s. His face seemed vaguely familiar to Lena. "Please, sit down. What I'm about to tell you will take some time." Lena lowered herself into the nearest chair, her eyes fixed on her husband. Andrew looked gaunt, thinner, but it was unmistakably him. Every line of his face, every gesture, painfully familiar. Only his gaze was different, lost, searching for something he couldn't quite recall. "My name is Nikolai Dmitrievich," the grey-haired man introduced himself. "I had a special department of financial security. 3 years ago, your husband discovered an international fraud scheme that could have caused the collapse of several major banks. The information he uncovered was so serious that his life became endangered." Lena remembered that strange conversation about moving abroad. So he had already suspected something. "We offered him to join the witness protection program." Nicholas Dmitriev continued speaking, but things unfolded too quickly. On the day of his disappearance, there was an attempted assassination. We had to act immediately, without preparation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Helen looked at Andrew. "Why did I have to believe you were dead?" He doesn't remember, the grey-haired man said softly. During the evacuation that day, there was an accident head trauma, retrograde amnesia. The last several years of his life were erased from his memory. Andrew took another step toward her, and this time no one stopped him. I've started remembering, he said quietly. At first just images, fragments or laugh, the smell of morning coffee, a grey tie. He swallowed. And today, when I saw you, everything came back. Not all of it, but Helen, is it really you? She stood up, her knees trembling. 3 steps to him felt endless. His hands so familiar, with the small scar on his right palm from a childhood bicycle accident, touched her shoulders hesitantly. I have all the documents. Nicholas Dmitri's voice sounded distant now. Investigation reports, medical records, interrogation protocols of the main suspects. They've all been arrested. The trial begins next month. You're both safe now. The man in the dark suit silently opened the door and left. The grey-haired man placed a thick folder on the table. I'll leave you. Security is downstairs. They'll escort you whenever you're ready. Helen barely heard him. She was looking into her husband's eyes, the same eyes that smiled at her from the photo on their wall all these 3 years. Forgive me, Andrew whispered. I didn't remember, but I always felt like something was missing, something important. Her fingers trembled as she touched his face. The grey at his temples, new wrinkles round his eyes, the stubble on his jaw. But his scent was the same. I brewed coffee for her too every morning, she said. For 3 years, he did what he always did when she was upset, pulled her into his arms, pressing his face into her hair. And for the first time in 3 years, Helen felt she could breathe again. Dawn was breaking outside. Cars honked below. The city was waking up. A new day, a new life, and so much to say. The first weeks were the hardest. They learned to be together again, as if piecing together a shattered vase carefully. Afraid to cut themselves on the sharp edges. Andrew flinched at sudden noises, stared out the window for long stretches, sometimes freezing mid-conversation as he tried to capture fleeting memories. Helen took a leave from the hospital. When Dr. Marina Sergeeva learned the whole truth, she cried and hugged her. I told you miracles happen. Colleagues sent greetings, but kept their distance. Knowing the couple needed space, their apartment seemed alive again. Andrew wandered through the rooms for hours, touching things, each touch restoring a piece of his past. We bought this cup in Prague, he said one morning, holding a blue ceramic mug. It was raining. We ducked into a small shop to wait out the storm. And you fell in love with this set. Helen nodded, fighting tears. Every recovered memory felt like a gift. They started small, shared breakfasts, evening walks. Andrew told her about his 3 years in witness protection life in a small seaside town, working as an accountant for a farm. An apartment overlooking the ocean. I would stare at the waves for hours, he said, feeling that somewhere out there was another life, the real one, but I couldn't remember what it was. Gradually, fragments of the day he vanished resurfaced. The meeting with the informant, the final evidence of fraud, the tale he noticed too late, the attempt to escape through the service exit, the blow to the head. He woke up in a hospital with a new name, a passport identifying him as Serge Nikolaev. I should have found a way to contact you, he said during sleepless nights. I should have. Helen held him tighter. You're here now. That's what matters. Nicholas Dmitriev regularly sent updates on the investigation. The bankers involved in the scheme made a deal with the authorities. Billions of rubles, dozens of shell companies, offshore accounts. Andrew was called to testify, this time protected by an entire team. His parents flew in from the city of Novosibirsk the day after they learned he was alive. His mother cried. His father tried to stay composed, but his hands shook when he hugged his son. We knew it. We knew you were alive. His mother repeated. Life slowly found a new rhythm. Andrew began working remotely, consulting small companies. Helen returned to daytime shifts. In the evenings they cooked together. Andrew had become a surprisingly good cook, something he picked up during those missing years. "You know what helped me stay sane?" Helen asked once while slicing vegetables. "I talked to you every day, told you everything, how my shift went, who I met. It must have looked crazy." Andrew put down the spatula, walked over, and hugged her from behind. "Not crazy. I talked to you too, only I didn't know it was you." 6 months later, the trial took place. Andrew was the key witness. His testimony, backed by evidence, was irrefutable. The organizers got long sentences, and the story spread across the country. Reporters begged for interviews, but they refused. They had enough of publicity. On the first anniversary of his return, they went to the seaside town where Andrew had lived under a false name. A small hotel by the beach. The sound of waves, seagulls crying. "I used to sit right here," he said, pointing to a stone embankment, watching the sunset, wondering why the ocean made me feel so sad. "Now I know. We dreamed of coming here together." Helen squeezed his hand. "We're here together." That evening they sat on the balcony with wine, planning a future. A real future, with no fake names. No missing years. Andrew pulled a small box from his pocket. "I found this while going through my things. Inside was a simple gold ring. I want to ask you to marry me again." Helen laughed through tears. "We're already married." "I know, but I want a new story. Our story without missing chapters." The sunset glowed golden across the sea. Music drifted in from the promenade. Voices of passers-by floated in the warm air. An ordinary evening of an ordinary day. But for them, it was the beginning of a new life. A life where nothing needed to be found anymore. Because the most important thing had finally been returned. "Yes," Helen whispered. "Of course, yes." Andrew slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to come home, just like they had.